segmentation for and against is certainly is capable of being based on COVID itself and the risk of catching the acute symptoms or disease. But as you said, the concern about long COVID is a slightly separate factor, is it not? And we can see, if we look at the schedule of your notes, if we go to 159, yes, this was something that you were concerned of at the time. You say number 10 team segmentation meeting, pushing really hard on segmenting, allowing people back. We explained, one, young still get ill and may get long-term effects. Is that a reference to long COVID there?
Yes.
And then we see that you refer to some of the other problems that you've just identified. And indeed, you also refer to long COVID. We see another reference in your notes. If we look at page 210, now here you are addressing the Great Barrington Declaration, which, just to be clear, is a very different beast to the segmentation ideas that were being developed by Professor Woolhouse. Is that right?
Well, they are related. I mean, there was part of what was being suggested was segmentation and then allowing the levels to rise in other groups. The Barrington Declaration was at one end of that, which is a complete let it sweep through everybody else. And I think Mark Woolhouse was not in that position.
No, it's a much less nuanced approach, but nonetheless, long COVID was an objection to the Great Barrington approach, and one which you've identified here. We see the numbered point 4. That on the 6th of October, a note that you make. We know the Great Barrington Declaration was current at the time. If we could go on 3 pages in the notes, please, to page 213, we can see that very much at that time, you are also making a note that the Prime Minister was very sceptical about long COVID. It's like Gulf War syndrome, he says. We've seen other records from around this time and indeed later where he made this or a similar comment. Help us with what your understanding of the Prime Minister's view about long COVID was at the time, and also whether, as you understood it, it actually had any impact in terms of policy making, or whether these were really just noises off.
I think he didn't really think it was a big problem. I mean, he recognised, because we described 3 different long-term consequences. There was the post-intensive care syndrome that some people get. That's a well-recognised problem. There was organ damage that some people got from COVID. That's a very well-recognised, clear problem. And there was long COVID, which is much more ill-defined. And I think he was, as it says here, he was sceptical about that. And I don't think was keen to take that into account for policy making.
Do you think that there were decisions that he made or didn't make which turned on his approach to long COVID?
I don't think so, in the sense that I think he didn't really think about it. There wasn't any active decision based around this. He didn't really want to consider that, I think. You'd have to ask him. But there was definitely, during this period, the COVID pandemic was running at high levels all the way from August through to the end of that year. And so the recommendation was keep the prevalence low. That was not happening, and the consequence of that is more people with long COVID. And I don't think that was something that policymakers were keen to factor in.
Right. One more reference, please, in this same document, page 166. That's a few weeks earlier. Here we see Matt Hancock, as you say, explain things well for once and remind them about long COVID. So can we take it that Mr. Hancock was understanding and alive to the issues of long COVID at about this time?
It certainly sounds like it from that.
There are many other entries in your diaries which refer to Mr. Hancock, Sir Patrick, and you will know that some of the evidence the inquiry has heard from others is that they did not find during this period Mr. Hancock to be a reliable, trustworthy colleague. I don't want to take you through a whole load of unnecessary